smashed to smithereen, men, women and children in cities all over the world, we don't know, we have no grudge with. You know, I mean, I've just finished rereading Robert Graves' Goodbye to All That about World War I and the horrors of the trench warfare and stuff. That was horrendous, but a nuclear war would be unthinkable. So what the Scots are saying, as the moral conscience of the world, or certainly the nation, is we don't want them. Goodbye. And this is the Holy Spirit moving out of Iona, because I don't think Christianity in good conscience could endorse this. Now you might say, oh yeah, but if we get rid of them, what about the Chinese or the Russians? They've still got them. What about the Americans or the French, you know? I think the only thing we can fall back on is the moral force of conscience. You know, that is the Christian way. That is what St. Martin did from Tours, which is just up the road from here. St. Martin, who had been a soldier, said at a certain point, no more fighting. He became what they call a pacifist. But a pacifist is not just, you know, anti-war. A pacifist is someone who makes peace. I'm the pacifist in the active sense of someone that wants to make peace. And I would have liked to see more in both Lib Dem and Labour manifestos about retooling the Foreign Office as a peace mediation service. That and the MOD. You see, the MOD should rethink what its job is in the world. It's not fighting and winning huge wars with nuclear weapons. It's about building peace in countries. I've just met a soldier who lives close to me in France who was a member of the French Marines who served in Africa in many countries, and he said most of his service was at the invitation of the former African colony of France. Now they're independent, but they asked the French to go back in with peacekeeping, and a lot of what they did was build things like roads and hospitals and infrastructure, so the military has reformed itself as a peace building service, and that's what we should be doing. So anyway, there's a lot more to say about the Labour manifesto, but I'm going to move on because time is pressing. And there's a lot I want to get through. There's many more tribes. I want to talk about the Scottish tribe. You know, hats off to you is all I can say. I love you. You know, I lived among you for 7 years. You're my teachers. And your ancient druids are still, you know, teaching you from the higher planes about ethics and integrity. And I just hope you stay on course and are not bought and corrupted. As we get closer to the second Scottish independence referendum, as the SNP deliver on that, you will see attacks on their integrity. You will find skeletons in the cupboard of SNP people, like was done with Alex Salmond. You know, there will be the kind of oligarchical hijacking of British intelligence will throw everything it can at Scotland and demonise the SNP and demonise the Scottish independence movement. I just hope you have the moral character to stand up against it. I think you will. And good luck. And so, yeah, I also want to say that I respect and honour the people that live in Scotland that are English or don't want independence and will feel upset. Well, hang on, don't panic. If we all stay in the European Union, it's fine. You can still go and visit Auntie in Bournemouth, or still, you know, go and visit your husband in Leeds or whatever. That's why keeping the union is so important within the European Union. If crazy UK, Brexit types try and seize control of the state and force this Brexit on the people of Scotland, it is going to be much more difficult, and that's why, bless her, Nicola Sturgeon is so strongly fighting to stop Brexit. She's an intelligent woman, bless her. Okay, so now I want to talk about the Irish tribes. There are Irish tribes involved in all this, but they're seldom really talked about. Where were the Irish, politicians? Why are they never shown on the BBC apart from in Northern Ireland? Why don't we have them in Sheffield talking, both DUP and Alliance and Sinn Féin and so on? It's as if Britain doesn't understand or doesn't want to know about Ireland. I mean, it is part of the UK. It still has a voice. As chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for Britain and Ireland, I've been to Ireland many times. I have many friends both in the south and the north. I have many friends in all peace communities in Ireland. I've spoken at universities where they deal with peace studies, and I've also met many druids and other groups in Ireland. I've been to conferences in universities throughout Ireland, and I feel very, very strongly, this is why I'm so against Brexit, that it completely dishonours the Good Friday Agreement. It completely trivialises the hard-won peace in Ireland. And it completely ignores the fact that Brexit will bring a resumption of fighting on the streets of Belfast and Northern Ireland. I mean, now, Boris Johnson has literally not got the brain power to figure this. He's a PR man. He's a bumbling PR idiot who because he got an Eton education, bought and paid for, he thinks he's clever. This is the greatest delusion of ignorant people. I can quote you from the Proverbs in the Bible. You know, the greatest folly of the fool is not knowing they're fools. You know, whereas Theresa May has just come out, the reason she didn't want a hard Brexit and backed down from it was she was told unequivocally by her advisors it will lead to the resumption of fighting in Northern Ireland. And bless her, thank you, Theresa, she had a few brain cells still functioning in the ethical department, and she realised she didn't want that blood on her hands. Thank God, you know, she actually, did something decent. She should have worked out that actually the whole Brexit operation is unimplementable without the resumption of fighting in Ireland. It is not possible to square a circle. Brexit equals civil war resumes in Ireland. There is no way out of it. I've looked at every single way. Boris Johnson is simply lying to himself and lying to the British people, and his so-called deal is not a deal. It is a lie from beginning to end, and it will lead to the resumption of conflict. So whose side am I on in the tribal war of Ireland then? If I'm chair of this Truth and Reconciliation Commission, you know, am I a Protestant or a Catholic? I always say to my Irish friends, I'm a Protestant Catholic. I'm a Protestant in that I protest against injustice. I'm a Catholic in that I seek for universality and truth, and the truth whereby all men agree and all women, which is the real definition of the universality of Catholicism. I want the peace of Ireland to continue, and I want the North and the South to continue within a European Union, continue within the peace that has happened since the Good Friday Agreement. I pray every day that Brexit will be stopped and that peace will be maintained. And I love all the tribes of Ireland. I love the courage of the Catholic tribe of Ireland, of Northern Ireland, who consistently vote for their Sinn Féin or the SDLP, and they are such brave people. I mean, I think I might have told you that well, you may not know this, but when we had our hearings in Belfast for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, it was filmed, you can see the filming. We had a chap come who told us his life story to camera. He'd been a teenager growing up in a council estate in Belfast. He happened to be from a Catholic background. He played with his schoolmates all the time. Some were Protestant, some were Catholic. It didn't occur to him it mattered. They were just mates, right? And then one evening in '68, a mob gathered outside the family house with torches and shouting. And his mum looked out and, you know, what's going on? Somebody came out the mob and said, "Sorry, madam, your house is going to be burned down in an hour's time. You better get out." And it was a Protestant mob coming to burn a Catholic house. And he, as a young boy in his teenage years, he recognised some of the people in this mob were his schoolmates, right? And he had no idea what to do. And the family literally were forced to grab a few belongings, a few suitcases, and go out the door, and the mob burned their home down. Okay, that was his personal testimony. And he said, well, what do you do? They were homeless. They were looked after by neighbours. They went to a different part of Belfast. But can you imagine that? The horror, the shock, the feeling of betrayal, your friends doing that to you. Well, not surprisingly, this guy confessed. He said, look, I looked for who was supporting us, who was backing our community. And he discovered there was this thing called the Irish Republican Army, secret, illegal. He found people who knew where to go to find the people. And he joined it. He said they were the only people with any courage. They were actually trying to stop those Protestant mobs. And they were arming, they were then, doing what they did on a military style footing to at least redress the balance. And of course, he said he wasn't proud of it. He didn't want to turn to violence, but he couldn't see another way, because otherwise, what are you going to do? Let that mob burn every single Catholic house in the whole of Belfast? Where are you going to go if they come and burn your auntie's home and then your sister's? So, anyway, it's very moving testimony. And then he said, eventually he was caught and he was imprisoned, and he spent, many years in prison. And he was there when the hunger strikers were in prison, and he lived through a terrible time. He was only allowed out of prison because of the Good Friday Agreement, when they let some of these prisoners out. It's one of the good things that happened, right? And since then he's been working for a charity that helps people who used to be in the IRA, like officially, but now, I didn't know this till he explained, if you once served in the Republican forces, they regarded themselves as an army, but the state says they were a terrorist organisation. And so you can't get insurance on anything, a car, a house, nothing. If it's stamped on your security thing, ex-IRA, once you come out of prison or whatever, you can never ever get insurance again. You will hardly ever get a job, because they'll look at your CV and see, ex-IRA, no chance. And millions of other things. I don't think you need to get a driving license or a passport. He said this stuff to camera, and I was shocked, because I'm a sort of normal London, Brighton chap who believes in justice, and I thought surely after that peace agreement, Good Friday Agreement, surely everyone should have the slates wiped clean, because there were Protestant terrorists as well as Catholics. Surely they should all be equal. No, the system has favoured. It continues to persecute those who are on the Catholic side. And so he's ended up as a counsellor. A lot of those people have turned to drink. They become alcoholics or suicide. Huge suicide rates, depression, mental illness among those people. That's what that guy deals with on a daily basis. Now, I'm just saying that, based on that testimony, to say that's what the Troubles meant from that perspective. I've mentioned before the massacre the news has come out about the massacre of the Miami show band, where a multicultural band of musicians who were Protestant and Catholic at the time of the Beatles in the 60s, who were the darlings of the girls of Ireland, north and south of the border, were shot by a military-style Protestant thug organisation. All of them were gunned to death, including the lead singer, because they were too multicultural. They were Catholic and Protestant singing together, and that was against the ethos of the hard right-wing Protestant fringe groups. And they were all massacred. One guy got away, and he's just written the story of it all. This is stuff I learned when I got involved in Irish peace work, and I went and organised meetings in Dublin and Belfast, and I met these people who told me these stories. I'm privileged to have met them, and I've heard stories on all sides. That's why I'm pleading with my countrymen not to go down the Brexit route, because it will resume all that. And there's, more I could say, but time is pressing. So listen to my talks about the Irish problem. I've done it elsewhere. And so what I'm saying is both these tribes, the Protestant and the Catholic, have a shared vested interest in not letting Brexit happen. I love the Protestants of Belfast and Northern Ireland. I really respect some of their people, and I've met them and we've talked a lot. And one of the incredible paradoxes of the Tory sleight of hand is that they somehow talked the DUP into thinking that Brexit was in their interests. Finally, the DUP realised that actually Brexit means the end of Northern Ireland as a separate country, because what will happen is Northern Ireland will gradually rejoin the South, and there will be a political process. One professor, who's Professor of Law at Queen's University in Belfast, who's called Professor Colin Harvey, has just organised a conference with the Franco-British Lawyers Society in Belfast, talking about the impact of Brexit on the UK, and it's going to destroy Northern Ireland. It will become a separate country, rejoined to the south of Ireland. So these are huge issues. I next want to talk, so both tribes have a vested interest in stopping Brexit now, and they should, as parties, all the Northern Irish tribes should come together to stop Brexit. It's as simple as that. But how? I'm coming to the how in a minute. And the Alliance tribe, they're the kind of liberal tradition of Northern Ireland. They're like the Liberal Democrats. They're important too. They're part of this. They also want to stop Brexit. What about the Welsh? Why the Welsh are sort of equivocated? Didn't they mostly vote? There was a small majority in favour of Brexit. Well, the Welsh were never properly told what the implications were. They were completely misinformed. We know that the BBC and the other media just pumped out misinformation. I've just had a Welshman visit here, who's a Labour Party supporter from Aberystwyth. The Welsh have woken up. They don't want Brexit any more than, a turkey would vote for Christmas. I mean, it's a complete nonsense. The Welsh are an internationalist culture, and I have an enormous respect for Welsh culture. I lived there for 10 years. I had a cottage in Montgomeryshire. I've just written a piece about Lord David Davies of Llandinam, who founded the National Library of Wales in Aberystwyth, which is one of my favourite libraries in the world. As a druid, obviously, I could live there permanently, no problem. There's the Celtic Institute of Advanced Studies nearby. And Lord David Davies represents the quintessence of the Welsh intellectual of the 20th century. He founded the National Library of Wales. He founded the International Chair of International Studies at Aberystwyth University. He helped fund the League of Nations Institute of Intellectual Cooperation, which had Einstein and Gilbert Murray and Henry Bergson and all the intellectuals of the day in the 1930s trying to stop World War II. He fell out with Lloyd George because he felt Lloyd George had, become too bellicose. He didn't understand how to make peace, really. And I think Lloyd George, although he was a clever man and a good Welshman, World War I was a catastrophe, and it just should not have been allowed to happen from a Welsh perspective. I trained as a religious studies teacher in Wales, and I was once in a hotel in Llandrindod, Wales, where I was teaching as head of religious studies. In the hotel, it's a picture of the Kaiser coming on holiday to Wales in 1912 or something. He used to love Wales. He would come as an ordinary chap with his wife and explore, the Welsh hills. And I've been researching some of my druid history at the time of that. And one of my great heroes, Christian Bunsen, was the ambassador from Prussia to Queen Victoria's court and government. And he married the sister of Lady Llanover, who was the great sponsor of the Welsh rediscovery of its druid ancient history. The Mabinogion was translated by Lady Guest, who was a friend of Lady Llanover. And Bunsen married this Welsh aristocrat woman. And it was Bunsen. He was a Christian and a mystic and a philosopher. He sponsored research into the links between ancient Welsh, Celtic, druidical traditions and European. I mean, Bunsen was a true European intellectual. He'd spent time in Rome. He knew the great historians of the German tradition and the European tradition. And sadly, he died before being able to stop World War I. And also, the other person involved in all this was, of course, Queen Victoria's husband, Prince Albert, who was a highly intellectual friend of... In fact, Bunsen's best friend became the librarian to Prince Albert. And he'd won an essay on ancient Celtic origins of myths and so on. They were friends with Max Muller, who was professor at Oxford, trying to look at the links between mythologies of all peoples, like Celtic, Germanic, Sanskrit, Greek, you name it. I mean, these were people of substance. Max Muller was a friend of the Duke of Argyll, who lived in Inverary Castle, who was a friend of Queen Victoria. When Victoria was in Scotland, she'd go and stay with the Duke of Argyll. And his daughter, her daughter, Princess Louise, met the Duke of Argyll's son, and they fell in love in the castle I used to live in Scotland. So I declare a vested interest in love and the fostering of ties between all the parts of Europe and Wales and Scotland. This is why I love the European Union. And I'm sure all these people are crying out from beyond the grave. I just discovered something else in this last week that was really, really moving, actually. I didn't know this before, I'm sharing it. The head, you see, Germany should never have done World War I. I mean, yes, of course. But you see, they were tricked into it, it turns out. Two Scottish historians have just published an amazing book, The Secret History of the Origins of World War I, which professed to put out in black and white, they've done a lot of research, that there was a kind of plot to bring the Germans into World War I and make it a world war, because the British London-based financial elites had decided they had to knock Germany out of being a rival. And okay, it meant the slaughter of millions of people, but that was the price they were prepared. Lord Milner and other sort of elite bankers and financial people who were controlling the